In a moment, I'm going to ring the bell, and the bell, let it be symbolic of us entering into a new segment in the day. Of course, those of you who've practiced with me, I'm sure you've read books on meditation, mindfulness. And it's always about being in the moment. Which moment? This moment. Right now, where you can hear my voice, where you feel yourself seated in front of your tablets, your phones, your computers. And so what the bell is going to do is it's going to create a doorway. A doorway from those past few moments where we've been having these lovely conversations. A doorway from all that you needed to do earlier this morning. For me, it was feeding the cats and breakfast things and making tea for some members of the family. And so there were things that I needed to do. And I'm sure there were things that you needed to do or have done. And then the bell is going to be a doorway into a new segment where we leave that behind. And we enter into this space that we've created for ourselves. Where we can simply be together. Be together with a capital B. Because that's what this practice is about. It's about being. We're going to sit together. In fact, we are already sitting together. And we're going to breathe together. And we won't overcomplicate it. There's not a lot else we need to do. And so here comes the bell, which I hope will indicate the beginning of this new segment, the newness, the freshness of this moment. You can leave behind anything that you would like to leave behind in those old segments. I'm sure some of you have had busy working weeks. And then of course there are the relationships with the family, the friends, and all of that. Anything and everything you'd like to leave behind as we step into this moment. You might like to feel your body resting on the surface underneath it. Adjusting yourself. Allowing your body to be more comfortable. Maybe we will begin by reminding ourselves of all those things that seem to happen without us needing to do anything. the earth, the sun seems to rise, and there's nothing we need to do. We can just observe it, notice it. I can see some of you can even feel the sunshine on your skin, the warmth of the sunshine, and there was nothing you needed to do to keep it in its space. There's nothing we need to do in order to keep the planet rotating. There's nothing we need to do to keep our hearts beating. It just continues to beat, continues to keep us alive, continues to support us. The blood flowing through our veins. If you like, you can tune into the different sensations that you can experience within your body as a result of this flowing through the nerves that somehow reach throughout the surfaces of our skin, our body. Indicating that our bodies have arrived in this particular posture at this particular point within your rooms, within your homes. There's a sudden newness to this moment because this moment has never been before. This combination, these words that I am uttering, the precise sensations that you may be experiencing within your body, the fragments of thought still floating around within your mind. It's all happening right now, in this new moment. And then our breathing process, something else that we don't need to do, it just unfolds from breath to breath. And moment to moment. Even though no effort is required to breathe, it just unfolds automatically. Why don't we spend a few moments becoming very conscious of it? And when I say becoming very conscious of it, I simply mean tuning into its sensations. Which surfaces are you able to experience this process called breathing? Let's begin with the outer parts, external to the nostrils. Which area can you feel the air brushing against as it enters? Maybe the tips of the nostrils. I don't know, for each and every one of us it might be Such a unique and different experience. Some of us might simply feel pure numbness and feel it perhaps a little bit deeper within the nostrils or nasal passage. Notice how those little passages, they seem to direct the air into and upward up the nasal passage. You might be detecting the temperature of the air. Noticing how deep into the nostrils you can still experience these sensations, and at what point that little turn arrives where it then travels downwards into the windpipes, down and through the throat. You might become aware of the rising and the falling of the chest wall. You're still following a very relaxed rhythm of breathing, your natural rhythm. You're not forcing anything, you're just observing. It's almost as though a few moments ago we were sensing our bodies, the skin around our bodies. And if you like, if you're more of a visual person, then let the outside be the stage. Like, have you ever been to one of those plays, those theater plays, where all the spotlights are shining on the stage? And then very gently the spotlights begin to turn inward, towards the audience, towards the observer, towards the witnesses of the play. And here the spotlights are being directed towards all these different sensations within our bodies, which somehow support this process called breathing. All the way down, deeper and deeper into the body. We'll follow it down into the tummy, noticing how as we breathe in, the stomach wall, it rises. How it balloons up from within. And then how it converts itself into an out breath. And let's begin examining how this breath flows outward. How the stomach wall, how it very gradually and very gently falls. The stomach muscles, you may experience a little bit of perhaps, contracting. What does the skin feel like? And the wind, it makes its way up the throat. And then very gently and very gradually down the nasal passage, it becomes a little bit vivid around the tips of the nostrils, where the out-breath gets filtered through those tiny hairs. And then you might begin to detect a little bit more of the temperature of this out-breath. Its distinct humidity, if that's what you'd like to call it. And even as it exits through the nostrils. How it brushes against the upper lip. Breathing in and out. You can always tell by how bored you are, how this particular practice is going, and whether you are actually experiencing your breath or thinking about it. Because we remind ourselves what we are after are really the sensations. Because we're so used, we can watch the tendency of the mind to often turn almost every exercise into a intellectual exercise where you begin to think about the breath, and a whole train of thoughts can sometimes begin around this. Especially when you feel boredom. Because the mind is so used to stimulation. It's used to its news, its television, the drama of the relationships around us. Each one of those building its momentum. But our practice today is using the breath as a tool to help us slow down this momentum. And one of the reasons we bring our attention to the breath is simply because it's not too interesting, like the news, like the dramas, like the conversations, the television programs. Most of us find it quite neutral, neither too interesting, nor do we find it its opposite, nor do we detest our breath. It just is, isn't it? And that's why we use it as a tool, because as we align our mind to the breath, we give the mind an opportunity to slow its momentum down. You may wonder what I mean by momentum, because there are so many scientific words surrounding the word momentum. And for that spotlight that we a moment ago we directed towards our breathing, let's redirect it now towards the mind and its thoughts. And notice where our thoughts are at this moment. Because what has happened is that, like I mentioned, we've spent so much time stimulating the mind. The news, social media, conversations, not all of it is bad, a lot of it is good. Lots of laughter, lots of fun, lots of smiles, lots of sharing. Then, of course, there are those, the other side of it, the darker side of it, where the news tells us about the state of the economy in the future, not right now, in the future. Almost all the fears are about the future. And then we find ourselves jumping into the future, and if it's optimistic, then we feel good. But if it's pessimistic, then we feel worried and anxiety and all those other emotions that society deems less desirable. And so that causes a momentum. And then there are those events in our past. It could be something as simple as perhaps just doing some of the chores this morning and rushing to get ready for this practice. You might have been in a hurry, and that would have created a momentum. And then there are all those other things from yesterday, day before yesterday, and then way before then, throughout our life, all those little memories we have, each one of them carrying their own emotional charge. And so it's gathered a lot of movement, a lot of momentum, like a river moving at quite high speeds. And then we've arrived in this space at 7 o'clock in the morning. And then we've sat down together. You heard the bell, and then the practice began. And if you know, and you would have noticed, and you probably can still notice, that your body is relatively still. But even though the body is still, there's so much momentum that's been picked up over the day, the weeks, the months, and the years. And so we remind ourselves at this moment that today's practice is not to force our mind to go still or blank. So if the thoughts were like a raging river, we are not here to build a dam to stop this flow. Because sometimes these dams, when not done in the right way, they can cause a lot of damage. And that damage in our practice today would simply be the frustration of those little thoughts that are going to tell you, I'm doing a terrible job in today's meditation. No doubt we've all had beautiful practices where the mind has slowed down. Maybe it's happening now, maybe sometime in the past. But they were just different points in this river's flow. And so we remind ourselves that today's practice is about developing a new relationship with this, with these thoughts. And it's a new relationship that's based on a space, an awareness, a sense of presence that's so much larger than the thought process. It's so much more spacious. And at this point, what we're going to do is, it's so abstract, isn't it? The mind, because its images are so real. What that person said to us sometimes 10, 20 years ago, it's still so vivid, so real. We can see them, we can hear the words, sometimes it's actions that someone did. Sometimes it's words and actions that we might have done against somebody else. All of these adding to the momentum. And so it's very difficult to comprehend that we could be observing the mind when its currents are so strong, seemingly carrying us in their currents from one thought into the next and to the next. And so if you are a visual person, it might help you to understand this relationship a little bit better. We spoke about being carried by the currents of thought. The thought stream, let's call it the thought stream. Let's feel its momentum. It can feel very rough in certain parts. And when you think you should not be thinking, when you think you're not meditating, when you think you're failing, it can sometimes feel like a great struggle where you're struggling to find your direction. You're kicking, you're punching within the stream, trying to get a footing, sometimes even grasping for air. But then we're going to remind ourselves this is only a stream. And because we're caught up in it, we've forgotten how shallow it is. And because of how fast the currents are, how fast the momentum is, our bodies become almost weightless sometimes. And so the first thing we begin to realize is we just breathe. Because our breath, we know that our breath is one of the tools that can anchor us into the moment. So where earlier you were grasping and breathing in a quite shallow manner, we begin to breathe a bit deeper. Maybe relax our muscles and just become aware that we are in the stream. Beginning to feel the wetness of the water against our skin and the different sensations. Loosening your muscles. I mean literally, even in the visualization, as you loosen your muscles and allow the current to carry you, see if you can release the struggle, the tightness, the tension within your bodies right now. Feeling your muscles loosen themselves, the knots undoing themselves. What would it be like to turn this experience into one where there's that little bit more sense of fun? Just as we are becoming aware that we are within the stream, this sums up what this practice is about. Whatever you may be feeling, right now I'm assuming you're feeling fairly comfortable, fairly peaceful. But as always, I try to make this as practical as possible so that you may carry these practices with you throughout your day, throughout your weeks, throughout your months. And so when you experience anger, when you experience sadness, frustration, it's just like being carried by the stream. And this practice is one in which where we simply shift into that state of awareness. That we are being carried by the stream. And we are not the stream. Becoming a separate entity, even though the stream still carries us. Even though we may be experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, sometimes even rage, the storms of rage. Our practice is to become aware of it. Your mind might be asking, what good is that if I'm feeling one of these emotions that society has told me I should not be experiencing? It's only the first step. As we loosen, and as you hear my words, I hope you will also try to loosen those little knots within your body. Right now, wherever it is you're seated or lying down, let's Let's turn this experience of floating down this stream into something quite different from what it was. Beginning to notice the scenery around us. The coolness, experiencing the coolness and the freshness of the water brushing against our skin. How refreshing it feels. And the ability of the currents, it somehow magically seems as though all the rocks in the stream are smooth and comfortable, like a beautiful slide that you've seen in one of those amusement parks. And that's normally what actually happens in most streams. The currents usually smoothen the rocks so that it becomes very smooth, flowing. And we begin to accept and make peace with the currents. We make peace with the anger, the frustration, the upset, all those different emotions that mean different things to each and every one of us. The limitations of language. But we make peace with it. And then there is a stillness. And then we remember that we're on this stream. We've been on this stream for a very long time. There have been, each and every one of us present right now, we've been through a lot. We have. But we've arrived here. We've always made it through. Always. And so we remind ourselves that this stream is safe. In our case, the streams, the various channels in our life, all those different experiences, they've led us to this moment. Where we sit together, we practice together, we found each other. We have so much in common. We are like-minded beings. And had any one of those experiences been any different, we might just be somewhere else. And if you ask me, I like what I'm doing right now with you. So there's something right. And so we make peace with the past. It had its function, but it's in the past, so we don't need to go back to it. And then we reach our legs out to see if we can find a footing. And perhaps even our hands, reaching out and our eyesight becoming more focused, more relaxed as we become more calm, more collected. And we see branches, we see roots coming in from the banks. We grab hold of some of them. Sometimes slippery and we keep moving, but finally we find the right root or the branch. We find a good footing, and then we gently carry ourselves out of the stream and onto the banks of the stream. A metaphor for what our practice is about today. First, making peace with, letting go of the need to resist, push against. allowing. And then taking a few steps onto the banks of the stream. Feeling the warmth of the sun upon our skin, taking in the views. Noticing how different it feels up here. Because when we were in the stream, it seemed as though all there was water. There was nothing else. There was water everywhere. It almost felt like a large ocean had swallowed us. But now that we've stepped onto the banks, there seem to be endless fields, trees, not to mention the skies above us with the warm sun bathing our skin. Warm enough to magically evaporate all those little droplets that soaked into our clothing and our skin and our hair. Becoming more and more comfortable. By the second, by the moment. Taking in the views, and then we turn back towards the mind, the stream of thoughts, and then we sit. Now we sit on the banks of this, making ourselves comfortable and somehow finding ourselves in the exact posture that we find ourselves in at this moment. How do you feel? Do you feel stable seated here? Can you notice the space between yourself and this flowing stream? We notice its momentum, its movement, its beauty, how its different currents, they reflect the light in different ways. Sometimes you might even see little rainbows appearing as the sunlight passes through some of the droplets. You can even hear its bubbling, its gurgling, and sometimes it sounds very rough in certain parts. But you hear all of these. You allow them. And then you notice some parts of this stream. The current seems to slow down, so much so that it seems so pure and clear and clean. So much so that you're almost tempted to walk up and scoop up a handful so that you could have a nice, cool, refreshing drink. You sit, you watch, you smile. In the realization of this new relationship that has become so much more clearer. you still see pieces of plastic, the odd piece of driftwood, a fallen branch, being carried by the stream. Just as you see those events, those memories from the past, that troubled you for very long periods. But now you can observe it, you can notice it, and you don't have to jump into the stream and try to either pull it out or follow it. You can just allow it to drift past. But sometimes, like a flash, you find yourself back in the stream and you don't know how long you've been in the stream. What must have happened is that I must have slipped. It must have been a very slippery slope, but I don't remember slipping. But here I am again, being carried by the currents. But now the second time it's a little less scarier, because I know it's a stream, I know I once climbed out of it. I know how to do it. And so once again, you patiently relax, you let go, you find the branch, the footing, and then you step out again. And again and again and again, which when you hear my voice, I have no doubt that the mind is going to say, this is very frustrating. How many times am I going to fall back into this stream? And to that, it's not wrong to have a dialogue with the mind sometimes when it asks good questions like this. We remind ourselves, we remind our minds that this is a practice. Everyone calls this a practice. Just because you get better at it as you practice. Where are we going to find the patience? How are we going to find the patience? You know those banks upon which we were resting and observing our thoughts? Another word for those river banks, those banks of the stream, is this moment called the now. Those banks, they represented this present moment. And in this present moment, there's only now, and again now. And so you don't need patience, because every time you fall into the stream, every time you get caught up in your thoughts, your emotions, that becomes the first time. that becomes the only time. And the reason we call this a practice, the reason we remind ourselves that this is a practice, is because we will find ourselves spending less and less time in the stream. We will find ourselves realizing that we are in the stream sooner and sooner and sooner. Until there will come a time when we will be spending more time on the banks of the stream. And the beauty about being on the banks of the stream, or rather spending more time on the banks of this thought stream, is that you begin to realize that you can choose which part of the stream to give attention to. Because there's only one part of the stream that you can give attention to at any one moment. You can notice the clarity, the clear water, the clean, still, beautiful, cool water. Those little droplets that give you the illusion of rainbows. And when your attention is on these parts of the stream, all else simply flows past. And this reflects in many ways our daily life. Right before us at this particular moment. The simple fact that we are able to communicate in this way. Our ability to access the technology in front of us. The freedom that we have to tune into these channels and into each other's practice. Examples of us tuning and giving attention to those parts of the stream that somehow help us to feel that little bit better. In a moment, I'm going to ring the bell, and this will just take us into the final part of the practice. A short meditation where we'll just give our immune system a little boost. But when you hear the sound of the bell, feel free to stretch, to move, to give your body any form of relief that it's asking for. In these final few minutes of our practice, as I mentioned, we'll just spend a few moments just allowing our immune systems to resurface. I'll talk you into the practice. I'm sure many of us have discovered a very strong bond and relationship between our mind and our bodies. And this is so apparent when you feel nervous about something. You'll feel your stomach going quite funny. That feeling some people describe as butterflies in the stomach. When you feel angry, if you were, maybe in the future you might be more aware of it, but sometimes the teeth grind, the skin around the forehead. For me, it's the skin around the forehead. It begins to wrinkle. My eyebrows begin to play up. Your breathing changes. And so there's a deep connection between the mind and the body. And so when we experience stress, the stress of work, the stress of the house chores, and all those things we have to do, they all somehow translate into little pockets of tightness, sometimes noticeable because they are in our skin and our muscles, and some of them so much deeper within the body, within the organs, within different organs. And because we've held on to certain worries and thoughts for very long periods, it almost becomes the norm to us. And so in this part of the practice, we're going to surrender control of our body to our immune system. Because our immune system is always balancing, always healing, always wanting to look after us, always wanting to keep us safe. And so we all know when we go through very stressful periods of work or life, it's always followed by a cough or a cold or something like that. You become vulnerable to illnesses. And in this practice, I'm going to very quickly take you through different parts of your body. And I'll use, for those of us who are visual, we'll imagine this awareness, this presence that we bring to the particular body part as light. And so we introduce different qualities to the light. What quality would you like to give this light that for you would represent calm, kindness, all those qualities that you could feel were not very compatible with stress and anger and frustration. So it would be calm, it would be soothe, it would be kindness, it would be gentle. And so let's bring these and any other qualities you'd like to bring to this light. Let it be a light filled with warmth and comfort and soothing, like a warm oil which you've sometimes possibly experienced in a massage. And so let's feel this awareness bathe our whole scalp region. So we begin with the top of our heads, almost as though there were droplets being poured onto the surface. This warm light, liquid light spreading throughout the scalp, loosening the skin, the muscles around the scalp. And each cell that this light touches, let it also represent a surrendering of the cells, of the skin, of the bone, of the muscle. A complete and total surrender to the laws of gravity so that gravity takes over. And what does gravity do? It brings all bodies to a rest, doesn't it? And so as this light bathes the scalp, let's feel it gravitate downwards through the skull, in through the brain, bathing the brain so that We release the need to perform any activity at all using the brain for these brief few moments, these final brief few moments that we have together. This light of awareness spreading downwards into the eyes, the inner ear, where all those tiny vibrating bones are, the facial muscles, the mouth and the lips, the neck, the muscles around the neck, releasing all unnecessary tension. Don't forget the jaws. Feel your jawbone loosening itself and tiny gaps appearing between the row of teeth in your upper jaw and the row of teeth in your lower jaw. Feeling the dryness or the moisture of your lips, the tongue. Light of awareness seeping through the neck into the spinal column. The light of awareness spreading down the spinal column, vertebra by vertebra, so that you very gradually and very gently become aware of your body's posture, the shape and the arch of the spinal column, which somehow carries within it vital fluids relevant and always aiding in the immune system and functioning of the different parts of our body. This light of awareness allowing us to release and from within perhaps repair all that needs to be repaired, perhaps not in an instant, but initiating the process, which will continue long after we cease with this practice. And so all we're doing is we're beginning it, we're initiating this process. This light of awareness spreading from the spinal column into the muscles of the back, the lower back, the upper back, the upper regions of the shoulder blades, into the arms, so that you feel the weight of your arms. You feel the area upon which your hands are resting upon. You feel all that is to be experienced through the tips of your fingers. You feel your shoulders drop that little bit more under the weight of your arms as you let go and you release. And now this light of awareness spreading downwards through the chest region, the mid regions, into the stomach. Spend a few moments bathing all your vital organs within. I know it can be a little bit tricky because it's so difficult to distinguish between one organ and the other. We know rough locations, but all we want to do is we're not here to give ourselves more work or stress ourselves out in any way, and so we just release intentions. That this light of awareness, this healing light, this light with many healing and relaxing qualities, that it reaches all the organs that are calling it. And from within, Perhaps even through our imagination, let's imagine what it feels like to let go and allow the immune system to once again retrieve cellular control of all these different organs, the cells, the flow of blood through our heart, the pumping of oxygen, carbon dioxide. The extraction of nutrition that takes place within the digestive system. This light of awareness gravitating downwards into the pelvic region and into the legs, the thighs, the hamstring muscles behind the thighs, the knee joint, the muscles, the ligaments within the knee, into the calf, the shin, and spending a few extra moments bathing the feet all the way from the ankles all the way down to the tips of the toes, and finally bathing the soles of the feet, which somehow magically protect us, carry us, support us, are in direct contact with the flooring, the carpet, the shoes underneath us. Our whole body sitting here breathing, bathed in this light of awareness. And if it's light, and if our skin consists of nothing more than atoms and molecules, would that not mean that there is space in between these atoms and molecules? And the light, it mingles within and around these atoms and molecules, and somehow merging into the light in the room, in the space around us. And so we no longer desire to contain this light within our form. We allow the light to dance with, the light entering into our rooms through the windows, through the skylights. And just like we adopt the qualities of this light now so as to travel at tremendous speeds, no longer containing these lights within the walls around us, allowing the light, we'll call it this light of awareness, allowing it to travel through the streets outside your home, allowing it to bathe cities, islands, continents, the planet. I don't know what you're experiencing at this particular moment, because we're all individuals and we're all having very unique experiences. But if it is a pleasant experience, is there any person, group of persons, animals or group of animals, plants, trees that you would like to share this feeling with? So you're not sharing the light, but you're sharing your experience. Or perhaps you might just want to choose a random group of people, perhaps those without shelters, without homes. Perhaps they may be in this timeless state. Perhaps it may even be those of someone we knew who has transitioned from this physical world, who has somehow left their physical form. Just sharing this experience of stillness, peace. It might be people in refugee camps, migrant workers in a dormitory, in the belief that as this light touches these people, it could be people who may be experiencing loneliness, people at some level of physical discomfort because of an illness. Let's for a few moments just imagine that as this light of awareness reaches them, it brings them some form of relief. If they are ill, it brings them some form of relief from the pain and discomfort. If they are hungry, it brings them in some nourishing, delicious food that they've been craving for. If they are lonely, it brings them a smile. The phone rings, the doorbell rings. Someone remembers them and brings company to them. All we want is to share this experience. Not because it would benefit them in any way, but just because it feels good to share. Without needing to travel hundreds or thousands of miles. Just believing for a brief few moments. Because we can. Because of how powerful a tool the mind is. Since we spend, at least many of us, we spend more time thinking about thinking thoughts that upset us. Why not think thoughts that allow us to feel that little bit better? And that's all we're doing. And simply bask in it. In a moment, I'm going to ring the final bell for today's practice. And you know what's coming next. I always call it the final bell. But it just allows us to move from this segment into the next segment in our day. And the day is going to continue to unfold from moment to moment to moment. And having had this opportunity to tap into the state of awareness, the state of presence, having had this opportunity to sit on the banks of this stream and observe the flow of the thoughts, perhaps we might choose to experience some of these unfoldings in completely new and fresh ways outside of those currents of thought, those habits, and just bring some freshness, some newness, and hopefully lots of happiness.